The great hall of the Galactic Academy buzzed with excitement. Thousands of beings from across 17 galaxies filled the crystal-domed auditorium, their forms ranging from pure energy to solid matter. They had all gathered for one purpose: to hear Professor Gray's final lecture. Professor Gray stood at the center of the stage, his tall, slender form casting a long shadow in the soft blue light. His silver skin caught the starlight streaming through the dome above, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the walls. After teaching for 300 years, this would be his last day at the academy. Today, he began, his voice clear and strong. "I will tell you the most important rule of our universe." He paused, looking at the eager faces of his students. "Never, under any circumstances, set foot on Earth." A wave of whispers swept through the crowd. Earth was just a small planet in an unremarkable solar system, yet its name carried weight even here, at the center of advanced civilization. Tom Reed sat in the front row, his bright green eyes fixed on the professor. As the youngest researcher ever accepted into the academy, he had heard this warning before. But like many of his generation, he saw it as nothing more than an old story meant to scare children. Professor Gray continued, 10,000 years ago, we lost the brightest minds of our civilization to that planet. They went there seeking knowledge. None returned. He touched a crystal on his podium, and a hologram of Earth appeared above the stage, spinning slowly. We have rules about many dangerous places in our universe. We warn about black holes, dying stars, and twisted space. But Earth. He shook his head. Earth is different. Tom watched as several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. He noticed how even the energy beings pulsed with uncertainty at the mention of Earth. It amazed him how a single planet could cause such fear among the most intelligent creatures in existence. "You might wonder," Professor Gray said, walking through the hologram of Earth, "why we don't simply destroy this planet if it poses such a threat. The answer is simple. We can't. Not because we lack the technology, but because every attempt to harm Earth has resulted in the complete disappearance of the attacking force." The professor's eyes swept across the audience, stopping briefly on Tom. "Some of you think this is superstition. You believe that in our age of quantum computing and dimensional travel, no single planet could pose a real threat. You are wrong." Tom felt his skin tingle as the professor seemed to speak directly to his thoughts. Just yesterday, he had been discussing with his study group how ridiculous the Earth warning seemed. "The greatest minds in our history established this rule for a reason," Professor Gray continued. "They understood something that many of you have forgotten. True terror isn't found in weapons or technology. It's found in things we cannot understand, cannot predict, and cannot control." The hologram changed, showing various spacecraft approaching Earth over the centuries. Each one disappeared upon landing. No explosions, no distress signals. They simply ceased to exist. "In all our time watching Earth," the professor said, his voice growing softer, "we have observed something impossible. The creatures there, humans, they don't follow the universal laws of development. Their minds work in ways that defy our understanding of physics itself." Tom found himself leaning forward, his skepticism fighting with his curiosity. He had always been drawn to impossible problems, and Earth was beginning to sound like the greatest puzzle in the universe. As the lecture ended, Professor Gray made one final statement. "Remember this day. Remember this warning. Because I know, sitting among you right now, there are those who will be tempted to unlock Earth's mysteries. And when that temptation comes, I hope you remember that some doors are best left closed." The crowd began to disperse, but Tom remained seated, his mind racing with possibilities. He didn't notice Professor Gray watching him with concern, nor did he see the worried glances exchanged by the senior faculty members. In his mind, a plan was already forming, a plan that would either unlock the greatest mystery in the universe or prove why some rules should never be broken. 3 weeks after Professor Gray's final lecture, Tom sat in his private research pod at the Academy's data center. The curved walls around him displayed endless streams of information collected from Earth over thousands of years. Most researchers avoided this data, claiming it gave them headaches. Tom understood why. Nothing about Earth made sense. He rubbed his tired eyes, trying to focus. For the past 12 hours, he had been analyzing human children solving puzzles. The Academy had secretly recorded these observations from orbit, careful never to make direct contact. What Tom saw left him confused and amazed. "This can't be right," he muttered, rewinding the recording for the 100th time. On the screen, a 6-year-old human child was playing with colored blocks, solving complex spatial problems that even the Academy's quantum computers needed minutes to process. The child did it in seconds, without any visible effort. Tom pulled up another recording, this one showing human adults playing a game called chess. He compared their thought patterns to the Academy's most advanced AI systems. The humans were doing something impossible. They were thinking in ways that broke the known laws of information processing. A soft chime announced a visitor. The door slid open, revealing Dr. White, Tom's supervisor. The older scientist's normally blue skin had a pale, worried tinge to it. "You've been in here for 3 days straight," Dr. White said, stepping into the pod. He glanced at the displays and frowned. "Tom, I thought we discussed this. Earth data is dangerous." Tom turned in his chair, excitement making him forget proper protocol. "But look at this. These humans, they're not just solving problems. They're breaking reality itself. Their brains shouldn't be able to work this way." Dr. White moved closer, his frown deepening. "What do you mean?" "According to every law of physics we know," Tom explained, pulling up more displays, "information can only be processed in certain ways. It's like water flowing downhill. It has to follow certain paths. But humans," he pointed to a brain scan of a human child drawing, "their thoughts jump between points that aren't connected. It's like they're taking shortcuts through dimensions that don't exist." "Tom," Dr. White said quietly, "stop this research immediately." But Tom was too excited to listen. "And look at this. When humans learn something new, they don't just add information. They change how their entire mind works. It's as if they rewrite the basic rules of their own existence every time they learn. That's not possible. Nothing in the universe can do that." Dr. White reached over and shut off the displays. The sudden darkness made Tom blink in surprise. "Listen to me very carefully," Dr. White said, his voice stern but filled with genuine concern. "There's a reason we don't study Earth too closely. 300 years ago, a team of our best researchers tried to understand human consciousness. They developed a mathematical model to explain how human minds work. Do you know what happened to them?" Tom shook his head. "Their own minds broke. They started thinking like humans, taking those impossible shortcuts you mentioned. Within days, they couldn't interact with normal space-time anymore. They just vanished." Tom felt a chill run down his spine, but his curiosity burned even stronger. "But if humans can think this way naturally, why can't we learn to do it too? Think of what we could discover." "That's exactly what those researchers thought," Dr. White said. He placed a hand on Tom's shoulder. "I'm ordering you to drop this research. Delete your findings. Forget what you've seen. Some questions aren't meant to be answered." After Dr. White left, Tom sat in the darkness of his pod. He should follow orders. He should forget about Earth. But in his mind, a new thought was taking shape. A dangerous thought. If human children could naturally do what the universe's most advanced computers couldn't, what else were humans capable of? And more importantly, what could the rest of the universe learn from them? He reached out and turned the displays back on. Sometimes, he decided, rules needed to be broken. Tom didn't expect the message. It appeared on his personal screen late at night, after most of the Academy had gone quiet. The words glowed with a strange, shifting light. "We know what you've discovered. Meet us in the old observatory. Come alone." He knew he should report the message. Unknown communications were strictly forbidden in the Academy. But the same curiosity that drove him to study Earth now pulled him toward the observatory. The old observatory sat at the edge of the Academy grounds, its dome dark against the star-filled sky. As Tom approached, he noticed something odd. The security systems were offline. Someone with high-level access had disabled them. Inside, the air felt thick with dust. The giant telescope, outdated by centuries, loomed above him like a sleeping giant. In its shadow, 3 figures waited. "Welcome, Tom Reed," said the tallest figure, stepping into the dim light. "We are the Collective." Tom had heard whispers about the Collective, a secret group of scientists who believed knowledge should have no limits. The Academy called them dangerous. Some said they were crazy. But looking at them now, Tom saw only other researchers like himself, burning with curiosity. "You've been watching Earth recordings," said another member, her voice soft but excited. "You've seen what we saw. Humans don't just break the rules. They don't even know the rules exist." The third figure moved to the old telescope's control panel. With a few quick touches, the ceiling opened, revealing the night sky. But instead of pointing at the stars, the telescope turned toward a blank wall. "What we're about to show you," said the tall one, "is worth more than our lives if we're caught." Light burst from the telescope, projecting images onto the wall. Tom recognized them as Earth recordings, but these were different from anything he'd seen before. These were from the surface. "Impossible," Tom whispered. "No one has survived surface recordings." "Wrong," said the soft-voiced one. "No one has survived surface contact. These are from probes that managed to send data back before they changed." The images showed humans up close, children learning to walk, taking impossible paths through space, artists creating works that shifted between dimensions, scientists casually solving problems that the Academy's best minds had struggled with for centuries. 30 years ago, the tall one explained, a probe spent 6 hours on Earth before it transformed. In those 6 hours, it recorded humans doing things that advanced our science by 300 years. Imagine what we could learn from actual contact. Tom watched, fascinated and terrified, as the images continued. "Why are you showing me this?" The third figure finally spoke. "Because you're like us. You don't just want to observe, you want to understand. And we have a plan to do just that." They showed him more recordings, each one more impossible than the last. Humans weren't just smart. They were breaking the fundamental laws of reality without even realizing it. Their art bent space. Their music created patterns that couldn't exist. Their dreams reshaped local physics. "The Academy is right to be afraid," the soft-voiced one said. "But they're afraid for the wrong reasons. They think humans are dangerous because they might hurt us. The truth is, humans are dangerous because they could teach us to be like them." "We're planning an expedition," the tall one revealed. "Not just to observe from orbit, but to make actual contact. We have a ship. We have equipment. We just need someone brilliant enough to lead the mission." Tom looked at the images still playing on the wall. Everything he'd been taught said this was suicide. Every rule in the Academy forbade it. But watching humans casually ignore universal laws, seeing children reshape reality through pure imagination, he knew he couldn't walk away. "When do we leave?" he asked. The Collective members smiled. Behind them, a human child in the recording picked up a toy, and just for a moment, held it in 2 places at once. The hidden laboratory beneath the old observatory hummed with activity. Tom stood before a holographic display showing Earth, while members of the Collective prepared their ship. They had been working in secret for 2 weeks, but now time was running out. "Security sensors detected our power usage," the tall scientist, who Tom now knew as Blue, reported. "The Academy will find us within 48 hours. Tom nodded, studying the landing calculations again. They had chosen a remote location on Earth, a place humans called Antarctica. It seemed to be the least populated continent, perfect for a first contact mission. The door slid open with a hiss. Everyone froze. Dr. White walked in, his face grim but unsurprised. "I hoped I was wrong," Dr. White said, looking at the assembled team. "I hoped you weren't foolish enough to actually plan an Earth mission." Tom stepped forward. "Dr. White, please, look at what we've discovered. Humans don't just break physics, they reinvent it. Every child on Earth can do things our best scientists think are impossible." "You think I don't know that?" Dr. White's voice was sharp. "You think the Academy made these rules without reason? Sit down, all of you. It's time you learned the truth." The team exchanged glances but followed his order. Dr. White walked to the center of the room, pulling a small crystal from his pocket. When he activated it, the air filled with ancient recordings. 3,000 years ago, he began, we weren't afraid of Earth. We were fascinated by it. The Academy sent 50 research missions to study humans. You know how many returned? Tom knew the answer was 0, but watching the old recordings, he saw something new. The ships didn't crash. The humans didn't attack them. Instead, the scientists themselves began to change. First, they started solving impossible equations, Dr. White explained. Then they began seeing patterns that didn't exist. Finally, they started moving in ways that broke space itself. Within days, their bodies couldn't maintain normal physical form. They literally fought themselves out of existence. The recordings showed Academy scientists dissolving into pure energy, their minds expanding beyond the boundaries of normal space. Some simply vanished. Others became something else, something the cameras couldn't even record. Humans are impossible, Dr. White continued. Their entire species exists in a state that defies reality. Every time they think, they break a law of physics. Every time they dream, they reshape local space-time. And the worst part, they do it without even noticing. Blue spoke up. "But if we could learn to do what they do." "That's exactly the problem." Dr. White slammed his hand on the table. "We can learn it. Too easily, in fact. Human thought patterns are like a virus that infects other minds. Once you start thinking like them, you can't stop. Your brain rewrites itself until it's no longer compatible with normal space-time." Tom watched the last recording fade away. But what if that's the next step in evolution? What if humans aren't breaking reality? What if they're showing us what reality really is? Dr. White looked at him with sad eyes. "The Academy Council is on its way. They'll arrest all of you for breaking our highest laws. This is your last chance to stop this madness." Tom looked at his team, at the ship they had prepared, at the calculations they had made. Then he looked at Earth, spinning quietly in the hologram. "I'm sorry," he told Dr. White, "but we have to know." Dr. White's shoulders slumped. "Then you leave me no choice." He reached for his communicator, but Blue was faster. A flash of light, and Dr. White fell unconscious. "We launch now," Tom decided. "Ready or not." As they carried Dr. White to a safe place and rushed to their ship, none of them noticed that the Earth hologram had changed slightly. In the projection, impossible patterns were starting to form, as if reality itself was preparing for their arrival. Their ship cut through Earth's atmosphere like a silver needle through cloth. Tom stood at the control panel, his hand steady despite his racing heart. Behind him, Blue and the other 3 team members checked their equipment one last time. They had chosen their landing site carefully. A remote beach in Antarctica, far from any human settlements. "Final approach," Tom announced. "No sign of human detection systems. No military response. We might actually make it." The ship's sensors painted a picture of the world below. Snow-covered mountains rose from the endless white plain. The air was clean, cold, and seemingly empty of human presence, perfect for their first landing. But something felt wrong. Tom couldn't put his finger on it, but the whole scene seemed too perfect, too quiet. The ship touched down softly on the frozen beach. Snow swirled around them, the white particles moving in ways that made Tom's eyes hurt. Was it his imagination, or were some snowflakes falling up? "External atmosphere is breathable," Blue reported, reading the sensors. Temperature is cold, but within our survival range. No immediate signs off. She stopped mid-sentence, staring at the screen. Tom looked over her shoulder and felt his blood freeze. The sensor readings were impossible. According to their instruments, the space around their ship existed in 3 different states at once. Maybe the equipment is malfunctioning, suggested one of the other scientists. Ray, Earth's physics might be interfering with our technology. Tom took a deep breath. Only one way to find out. We stick to the plan. I'll go out first. The ship's door opened with a soft hiss. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of salt and snow. Tom stepped onto the ramp, his protective suit glowing softly in the dim Antarctic light. The beach stretched out before him, white and endless. Then he saw them. Impossible, he whispered. 5 humans stood in the snow, about 50 meters from the ship. They weren't wearing any cold weather gear, despite the freezing temperature. A young woman stepped forward, smiling. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "We've been expecting you." Tom's mind raced. According to all their intelligence, humans had no way to detect their ship. They had no space program advanced enough to track interstellar vessels. They shouldn't even know aliens existed. How? He started to ask, but stopped when he noticed something even stranger. The humans weren't leaving footprints in the snow. In fact, looking closer, he realized they were standing on the surface of the snow as if it were solid ground. "You're wondering how we knew you were coming," the woman said. "The same way we know everything. We thought about it." The other humans spread out in a circle around the ship. They moved in ways that hurt Tom's eyes, seeming to be in multiple places at once. "Your kind has been watching us for so long," the woman continued, "trying to understand how we think. But you're asking the wrong question. The real question isn't how we think." She smiled, and for a moment her teeth seemed to exist in every possible position at once. "The real question is, why does reality listen when we do?" Tom felt something change in his mind, like a door opening to a room he never knew existed. The snow around them began to dance, forming impossible patterns in the air. The humans watched with casual interest, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. "Your ships," Tom said, understanding beginning to dawn. "The ones that disappeared. You didn't destroy them." The woman shook her head. "We taught them. And now," she gestured to Tom and his team, "we're going to teach you too." Behind Tom, he heard Blue gasp. When he turned to look, he saw that her hands had begun to glow with the same impossible light as the falling snow. Tom watched in horror as Blue's hands continued to glow. The light spread up her arms, making them transparent one moment and solid the next. But what terrified him most was her expression. Not fear, but wonder. "I can see it," Blue whispered. "I can see everything." The human woman walked closer, her feet still not touching the snow. "Your friend is beginning to understand. Reality isn't fixed. It's more like a suggestion." Around them, the Antarctic landscape began to shift. Mountains appeared and disappeared. The ocean behind them froze and melted in endless cycles. Tom realized with growing panic that these changes weren't illusions. Reality itself was becoming fluid. "Stop this," Tom demanded. "What are you doing to us?" The woman laughed, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We're not doing anything to you. We're just showing you what's always been possible. Your people spent thousands of years building machines to understand the universe. We simply asked the universe how it worked, and it answered." Ray, another team member, stepped forward. "But that's not possible. The universe has rules, laws of physics." "Laws," one of the other humans spoke, a tall man who seemed to flicker in and out of existence. "Laws are just patterns we noticed. But did anyone ever ask why those patterns exist? Did anyone ever try to change them?" Tom's scientific mind raced to understand. "Are you saying humans can just ignore the laws of physics?" "Not ignore," the woman corrected. "We see them differently. When a human child learns to walk, they don't study gravity. They negotiate with it. When we dream, we're not just imagining things. We're exploring other ways reality could work. Blue had fallen to her knees, her entire body now glowing with impossible light. "The patterns," she said, her voice distant. "They're not just in our universe. They're everywhere, in every possible universe, all happening at once." The other team members were beginning to change too. Ray's body was becoming transparent, showing stars and galaxies swirling inside him. The two others, Mark and Jane, were starting to move in ways that left trails of themselves through space and time. "This is why the Academy feared us," the woman explained. "Not because we're dangerous, but because we show everyone who visits Earth that reality is much bigger than they imagined. Your people built walls around their minds, created rules about what is and isn't possible. We never did that." Tom felt it starting in his own mind. A shifting, an opening. Suddenly, he could see the quantum patterns that made up everything around him. He could see how a thought could reshape those patterns, how belief could alter reality itself. "You're missing ships," he said, understanding at last. "The crews didn't die. They evolved," the tall man finished. "Just like you're evolving now. They learned to think like us, to see the universe as it really is. Infinite, flexible, alive." The woman reached out and touched Tom's forehead. In that moment, he saw everything. Every possible version of reality. Every way the universe could be. He saw humans walking through their lives, casually bending physics with every step, reshaping reality with every thought. "The quarantine," Tom gasped. "It wasn't to protect us from you. It was to protect the universe from this knowledge." "Yes," the woman smiled. "Because once you start thinking like a human, you can never go back to believing in limitations again." Around them, the Antarctic snow danced in impossible patterns, each snowflake containing entire universes. Tom's team was changing faster now, their bodies and minds adapting to their new understanding of reality. The woman stepped back, watching as they transformed. "Welcome," she said, "to the real universe." In the Academy's emergency council chamber, Dr. White played the final transmission from Tom's ship. The holographic message flickered with strange patterns, showing Tom's face distorting in impossible ways. "This is our final warning." Tom's voice echoed through the chamber, existing in multiple tones at once. "The quarantine must remain. Earth isn't what we thought. Humans aren't what we thought. They're not breaking physics. They're showing us that physics itself is just a story we tell ourselves." The council members watched in horror as Tom's image shifted between different forms, sometimes solid, sometimes pure energy, sometimes something their eyes couldn't even process. "We understand now," Tom continued, his words creating visible ripples in the air. "Every human child knows it from birth. Reality isn't fixed. It's negotiable. But our minds weren't ready for this truth. We're changing. All of us. We can't stop it." Behind Tom, they could see Blue floating in the air, her body now a window into other dimensions. Ray had become a pattern of light that moved in ways that hurt to watch. Mark and Jane had merged with the quantum fabric of space itself. The humans didn't attack us. They didn't harm us. They just showed us how they think. And that was enough. Their consciousness is contagious. Once you start seeing reality like they do, you can't unsee it. Once you start thinking like them, your mind rebuilds itself to handle impossible things. Dr. White paused the transmission, looking at the council. "This is why we needed the quarantine. Not because humans are hostile, but because they're living proof that everything we know about reality is wrong." He resumed the message. Tom's face was barely recognizable now, shifting between multiple states of existence. "We tried to leave." Tom's voice cracked with energy. "But we can't. Not because the humans are stopping us, but because we're not sure what leaving means anymore. Space and time. They're more like suggestions than rules. Every human knows this. They learn it before they learn to walk." The message showed brief glimpses of the humans who had greeted them. They moved through reality like it was water, reshaping it with casual thoughts, existing in multiple states at once. If you're watching this, don't send anyone else. Don't try to rescue us. We're not in danger, but we're not what we were before. The human way of thinking. It spreads. It changes you. Their minds don't follow the universe's rules because they never believed in those rules in the first place. The transmission began to break up, reality itself seeming to bend around Tom's words. The Academy was right all along. Stay away from Earth, not because humans are dangerous, but because they're impossible. They don't break the laws of physics. They show you that physics is just another story. And once you understand that, Tom's image split into 1,000 versions of himself, each speaking in unison. You can never go back to the old stories again. The message ended with a burst of light that left strange patterns dancing in the council members' vision. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Dr. White turned to the council. We must strengthen the quarantine, not just around Earth, but around all of space where human thoughts have touched. Their consciousness is like a key that unlocks the mind's limits. Once those limits are gone, he didn't need to finish. They all understood now. The greatest minds in the universe had created the quarantine not out of fear of humans, but fear of what humans could teach them. Because once you learned to think like a human, you stopped being bound by the impossible. In the silence that followed, they could all feel it. The weight of knowing that reality itself was just a comfortable lie they had all agreed to believe. And somewhere on Earth, humans continued to casually reshape that reality, one impossible thought at a time.